Hey, this is episode 3. We got a brand new guest. We're talking this week about this week. I don't know if this is a weekly show or not, but it's still technically an accurate statement. We're talking about some MMOs. Star Wars Galaxies, The Old Republic, some World of Warcraft, a lot of stuff like that. And we have a unique perspective. I was able to ask my friend how he met his boyfriend in Halo 2 forums. And they've been together for like over 10 years, I think it is. So that's a really awesome story. So we get into a lot of stuff like that. And I want to say this is like almost a year after I recorded those first 2 episodes on a camera, back before I had the full direction of what I wanted to do with this and make it a podcast and everything like that. So this is basically a relaunch. I hope the audio is much better. Although this was recorded on my phone because my recorder crapped out that I used to use in college. Luckily, I always used at least 2 forms of recording just in case something happens, and it did happen. So I'm technically just using my phone for this, but it's way better than a camera across the room. So hopefully it sounds better, and thanks for checking it out, guys. Did you happen to find anything for your old characters and stuff on Galaxies?
I saw that there's a forum that I had used that was the SWG which is like an emulator project that I like created a character, like an account on there. There's no like information on my actual characters, but a few years ago I had created this account and then didn't touch it, and then came back like 2 years later, and in that time someone I had played with way back when had found my account and messaged me, and I missed them by like a year and a half, so I didn't actually get in contact with them, but that's the closest I've found, is that like someone found me somehow, which I thought was kind of wild, but that's the closest I've gotten to actually finding anything from my actual characters. I don't have any of the screenshots or any of that stuff anymore.
So what was that? Some sort of emulator?
Yeah, it was a group of people that were like trying to recreate the back end for Star Wars Galaxies, sort of like the City of Heroes scandal that kind of happened recently. They were trying to, from scratch, rebuild the whole back end without any of the source code or anything.
Because, to give it context, there's no way to play the game anymore, right?
Right, all the official servers are long gone. And the emulator projects are going as far as trying to recreate older versions of the game, because there were these 2 big schisms in the community. The first one was called the Combat Upgrade, where they changed a lot of the basis of Star Wars Galaxies and how it worked. And then the second one was called the NGE, the New Game Enhancement, I think. That stripped it from like 30-something classes to 9, and took everything unique about the game, pulled it out, and made it a WoW clone. And people hate that version of the game, so nobody wants to play that. So it's all trying to recreate the pre-CU and pre-NGE stuff.
Is that version available, the one that people don't like, or are they both unavailable?
Everything's gone.
Right. Why is that? Did they lose a license or something?
I think it's been a while. I think it just had stopped making them enough money, so instead of paying for the upkeep or cost on the servers, they just shut everything down and pretty much said fuck it, everybody. And by that point the community had collapsed so much. Part of the big issue was the new game enhancement that they put out came like 2 months after a major expansion that was tied into Revenge of the Sith came out. So a whole bunch of people had spent all this money buying this expansion, and then they pretty much unannounced dropped this huge thing that gutted the entire game. And people were so pissed that the entire infrastructure in that game collapsed. So within a few years, I don't think there was enough people playing to justify the upkeep costs.
Right. So generally, when was this game out? Like, what other games were out at the time?
I believe it was pre-WoW. I think of it as contemporary to like Guild Wars or City of Heroes, stuff like that. Early WoW. I played it in middle school, so that would have been probably even earlier than I was thinking. That was probably like 2003, 2004. So that would have been right before WoW, I think. Yeah.
So, like, on your hierarchy of MMOs, where would you put Galaxies?
I would put it right at the top. Like, it was janky as hell, and, like, it was in the time of, like, Thoughtbot and, like, really weird, ugly websites that had, like, buried information, but it felt like there was so much discovery in it, and so much customization. You could build player cities, you could have, like, elections in the cities to decide who ran them. Like, it felt like a real world that was, like, WoW feels very static. Like, it's a world that you are playing in a designed thing. Galaxies felt like a real living world, with real politics and just things were ever changing. And, like, you could be a Jedi in the game, but to be a Jedi was this very long, drawn-out process, and, like, the information on how to do it was sparse, and people who got there didn't, like, want to share that widely because they had, like, achieved things, and it was at a time where that stuff could remain hidden, and there weren't, like, hundreds of guides on IGN and GameSpot and everything that broke down exactly how you would do it. So it was just a lot of exploration and discovery and stuff, and it was also very janky, but, like, that's not what I remember about it. So I'm probably a little biased against it, but...
Well, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
You said you can elect players to be in charge of cities and stuff like that?
Yeah, it wasn't so much... It was like guilds were in control. I'm pretty sure there were elections. Now I'm worried that I might have been wrong on that, but that's how I remember it. So obviously, it's true. But I think it was whoever was the head of the guild that controlled the city controlled it, and I think you could have, like, faction wars, because you could take the cities away from whoever was controlling them. And I should look it up. I don't remember how... Because, like, you could have your own home in that city, and I can't remember if you would lose it if another guild came in and conquered your town. I don't remember.
Do you see any of that DNA in any current games?
Not really.
No.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing I can think of is the barracks that came to WoW a few years ago. But even that, like, the customization was that you could choose, I'm going to put a building here instead of putting it there. Whereas Galaxies was like, here's a planet, like, just fucking do whatever you want. That kind of customization within the world, I haven't seen anything like. And I think that's part of why I didn't like the Old Republic, because it just felt so sterile.
I have specific comparisons to the Old Republic I want to know about later.
Okay.
But tell me more about, like, what do you mean by it was janky?
Like, I believe the combat was very not balanced. Like, it was just sort of whatever. Because you could have people who were bounty hunters as their class, or you could have someone who was a dancer. And, like, that's not going to match up. Like, obviously the bounty hunter is just going to kick the shit out of the dancers. Or, like, the UI was before a lot of, like, what WoW had done that ended up streamlining MMOs. I said that I liked the exploration or not knowing. Like, that was nice sometimes, but then other times you just, like, wanted to know how to do something, and it was extremely difficult to find it out.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing you romanticize in the past.
Right.
Like, my game was Final Fantasy XI.
Okay.
And you couldn't do, like, anything by yourself. It was so hard, you needed a squad to do everything. And so, rose-colored glasses, it's like everything was so rewarding and challenging, and you really felt accomplished. But in reality, you were sitting and waiting for a group to form for hours sometimes.
Yep.
And if someone had to leave for dinner or something, you were down a person, you had to replace them.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
So yeah, just why would people be upset about overhauling the gameplay if it was considered janky and unbalanced and stuff like that?
Because there were so many unique things. Like, you could be an artisan and, like, you could just craft armor, or you could be a dancer and you could, like, have a town set up where you have people acting like the like harem of Jabba the Hutt, or, like, it was really rich for roleplay kind of stuff. So it, like, WoW came along and had 9 classes that each filled a specific role, and I think that was very easy for people to understand, and It was very accessible. Galaxies was not. Because, like, if you're a new player and you're like, oh, well, I want to be a dancer, you get deep into that, and then you realize, like, I can't do anything else that I want to do at this point. Like you can't, you're not really combat proficient. Like, if you get stuck in those situations, like, oh, well, like, you dumped all this time in here, and sorry.
Can you switch your class, or you gotta re-roll?
I know you could multi-class at some point, and I think you may have been able to change, but I think it was like you drop everything and then have to start again from the beginning, unlike the respec system in WoW, where like you can just shift from one thing to another at comparable level.
Right. So what are the meat and potatoes of the game? Like what is the goals and like end game? Like what are you doing like minute to minute?
Like there were quests, there were like quest systems and stuff, but a lot of it ended up just being social interactions. So you'd go to like the social hubs and there'd be people there and like you'd just talk with people, or you'd go raid like another city. There was probably some sort of real end game content, I'm assuming, but if there was, I never saw it. It was mainly just going through, like, I remember there were like repeatable quests on Dantooine, and like that was a big thing people would do, and you'd go out and kill lots of dewbacks or like whatever for money, and then you'd funnel that back into like armor, and it doesn't sound very compelling, but at the time I didn't really know any better, so it felt fun because I was doing it with other people, even if there wasn't like a clear end game we were working toward.
Right. Do you think it's because you were younger and you weren't playing it correctly, so to speak, and you were just enjoying what you were doing?
I think that's part of it. I think now I probably wouldn't have the patience to deal with something like that, but back then it was so new to me to have that world with so many people, and to just like some of the worlds were pretty barren, but like if you ran for long enough, because they were huge, like you would find huge skeletons, and like that would build stories in my mind even if they weren't actually in the game. But like nowadays I don't have time. Like I need regimented, like I need to be able to feel like I'm constantly making progress, and being younger, having a lot of time, I probably didn't care as much.
Yeah, I feel like games in general have made that sort of same trajectory as we have as we've gotten older.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there's not even that like a comparable game necessarily to that sort of pace.
Yeah.
So like, just tell me like some memories. Like, are you nostalgic? Like, do you miss the game?
Oh yeah, I miss it a lot.
Yeah, tell me about it. Like, what do you think about when you think about it?
One story that I think about a lot is that because stuff was so obscure in that game, it was not always clear to me what was an actual thing happening and what was like role-playing going on. And there was a misunderstanding I had with someone where they had me go on these like hour-long quests that seemed really esoteric to become a Jedi. But the actual process was so esoteric to become a Jedi from what I had heard that it just sounded believable to me. It was like, the real process was like you'd have to go to all these random places, and then you'd have to wait for like a random NPC to show up, and then after they showed up you'd have to go find this big fog forest and run through it. And if you weren't actually far enough and you found the fog forest, you just run through it forever, and like you couldn't actually get through it. So when this guy told me like, oh well, we have to go to these set of buildings and do these like in-game rituals to get you there, like it sounded plausible to me.
So he was messing with you, you're saying?
I don't know that it was malicious. I think he was role-playing and he thought I was role-playing and I didn't realize that was a thing. So I just went along with it. So like when he told me my character had to wear certain clothing or like do certain things, I just did it because I figured, oh well, this has to be how this actually works. And come to find out, none of it was real. He was just going through his roleplay routine, and I got to the end of it and got nothing out of it. But like, it is a moment that sticks with me way beyond any of the authored content in that game because it was wild. And even if I didn't get anything in game out of it, like it was still a really cool experience. That world led me to believe that could be real. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. So you never became a Jedi?
I never did. I had started down the path, and then I had stopped playing for a little while, and then the new game enhancement came out that then you could just like click a button and you were a Jedi.
Oh, wow.
So it took all of the accomplishment out of it.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah.
So that they must have been like rock stars walking down the street with a lightsaber or something like that.
Yeah, it was like when you saw Jedi, it was a big deal because you knew they had put hundreds of hours into this game and like they could go places you physically couldn't in the world, and it was very cool.
Wow. So is there like a plot to the game?
Maybe. I couldn't tell you what it was. I know it took place, I believe, around Empire Strikes Back, somewhere in that neighborhood. But I don't know for sure. Because like Vader is in it and all that kind of stuff.
He's in it? What is his role in the game?
I just remember seeing him. I don't remember him doing much. Like, you couldn't attack him or anything. He would just, like, his ship would land and he would, like, walk around places. And there were locales that were from, like, the prequels and stuff as well. Like, you could go to Naboo, you could go to Kashyyyk and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I have no idea what the story actually was in that. Yeah.
So no like cutscenes or
Oh no, nothing
like
like that. Nothing pre-rendered. No. Yeah, I can't. I think they had started to introduce some like in-game storytelling in the Kashyyyk stuff that was right before the NGE. But because of the timing of that, I never saw much of it.
Right. So did you have a guild or friends that you made in the game?
Yeah, I was a part of a few guilds through my time, and it was really interesting because I was in middle school, but the people I ended up playing with, I don't even remember how I found them, were varying degrees of adults, and when I had heard from that person on a forum years later, he had mentioned that a few of them knew each other in real life and worked together, and they like would laugh about how, not like at me, but like I was a very immature like middle schooler, so I'm sure I said things or did things that were wild. I know at one point there was a husband and wife in the game, like a real world husband and wife that I was questing with, and I don't remember what we were doing, but I was like, I said something along the lines of like I killed that bitch or something, and the husband got really mad. And it's like, you don't say bitch around my wife, and like all this other stuff, and like became this big thing. It's like I remember that happening, and like I remember being really apologetic and sorry about it, and like they treated it as like a teaching moment. I'm sure it was ridiculous, but like that's the kind of people I've played with, I guess. I think they were mostly in their early 20s. Through like maybe early 30s.
Right. Wow, that's a big gap.
Yeah. At the time I was like, oh, it doesn't matter, but I'm sure I was wild to them.
Yeah, like what do you even talk to a middle schooler about as an adult?
Yeah, I have no idea.
So were your parents cool with you playing online games and stuff like that?
Yeah, they didn't really care as long as they had an understanding with me that like I wouldn't give like personal information. As long as I wasn't doing that, they didn't seem to care. I think they figured playing online games kept me out of other trouble. So
yeah.
Other than probably not loving the subscription fees for the games.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. What do they cost back then?
I think it was $15 a month.
It's pretty standard, I would guess.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to update your computer or anything?
Nope. Well, it worked on whatever we had. It was just like an old tower PC. I don't even know where it came from.
Was that like dial-up days or?
I think that was early broadband. Because I remember playing it while listening to some podcasts that I knew about. And podcasts weren't really a thing until after broadband that I remember.
Yeah, I definitely don't remember knowing that word.
Yeah.
Back then. Wow. How did you find out about that? Because I personally haven't heard about the game.
Galaxies?
Yeah.
I think I had a friend who played it.
Real life friend?
Yeah.
You played together?
A little bit, but I think he fell off and started playing Guild Wars or something afterward, and then eventually he would pull me into WoW a while later.
Uh-huh.
But he played Galaxies and Guild Wars and City of Heroes, and I don't really know where he found out about that stuff. But I met him in 7th grade, so 7th and 8th grade was probably when I was playing Galaxies.
Are you still in touch with him?
No.
No?
Yeah, no.
So you went back to the game after the updates and stuff. Do you remember, like, being disappointed? Were you, like, hate playing it, or how was it?
It was more of just, like... I wouldn't necessarily say it was hate playing. It was just... I was confused as to why it was still there. Because I had known there was this huge backlash, and that massive numbers of people fled from it. So I think it was just, like, curiosity of, like, what is this now?
Right.
I don't think I played a ton of it. My favorite class in the game before it got gutted was called Beastmaster, and like you had like pets, you could have like a Rancor, and you could like breed all of your pets and all this stuff.
That's cool.
And I think when they revamped it, that was still one of the classes, but if I remember correctly, it was like a shadow of its former self. So I remember that being disappointing. And I remember because people weren't playing it, everything just felt empty. It was just like ghost worlds.
Right.
Still had all the towns, but there's nobody in them.
Did they like announce that it was coming to an end, and or did it just sort of like shudder?
They did have like an end event. I think it was right after the Matrix Online ended. Like I think they just did like I don't even know if it was just like a bunch of people hanging out in one place setting off fireworks, or like if there was like if Vader came down and killed people, or I didn't play the.
So you didn't take part in that.
By then I had given up.
Yeah.
And the people that I had knew years earlier that had played, all of them had stopped. And I didn't have any other way to contact them or anything, so.
Yeah, that's tough with an MMO to go back, 'cause when you don't know anybody anymore, and especially if they change the game. I've definitely experienced that.
And I think they may have done server mergers at some point as well. So probably, like, I don't even know if they would have been around.
So before we transition, is there anything else you want to say about the game? Like anything specific that it offered that you can't think of other games?
I do wish we could get more. It seems like there's such a big focus on balance specifically toward esports type things. So like WoW often seems like it gets tuned around the arena or around PvP and battlegrounds and stuff. And I think that has led to a world where you can't just have a class that's a dancer or like somebody who has pets. And I would like to see, I don't even know if it's viable at this point, but another open MMO that allows you to explore those spaces to express yourself in different ways, to be like just a crafter, like, and have some sort of economy that like supports that, so that it's not just like I'm grounding at levels. It's like this is actually what I enjoy in this game, and I'm going to creatively express myself through it. And I feel like nothing like that really exists. It's not a joke anymore. Like nobody takes Second Life seriously and that kind of stuff. And I think allowing more creative expression for players in situations like that would be really cool. And I wish somebody would find a way to do that.
Right. I think it might have been you who described the game to me as like a world in which like Han Solo exists, but you're not Han Solo, whereas in the Old Republic you get to play like as Han Solo basically.
Yeah.
How did you receive the Old Republic?
The Old Republic I had wished had been a bunch of separate single player games, because it introduced like the parts of MMOs I don't find enjoyable, like grinding, into what otherwise would have been pretty good storytelling for the time. I think it misunderstood where MMOs were going at that point. And I think it, especially as somebody who has so much nostalgia for Galaxies, having it be so railroaded really put a bad taste in my mouth.
What do you mean railroaded?
Like, there's planets, but they are, like, you cannot affect those planets in any real way. There's no change that you are enacting upon the world. There's just a story that you are living through in parallel with other people that are maybe in different stages, but that world's never going to change.
Right. I agree with what you said about the single player aspect. That's how I played that game.
Yeah.
Just pretended it was only me. And there has been like events like 12 times XP events where you can just blast through the story
Right.
and just ignore the MMO aspects of it.
Yep.
That's pretty much what I did.
Yeah.
In terms of gameplay, it's pretty much just WoW in space.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep.
So I remember we were in college at the time, and we talked about maybe we could roll 2 characters together, and it didn't click because we were role playing like totally different morals and stuff like that, and the game would have like a dice roll for your dialogue decisions.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and it didn't. You probably don't remember because it lasted only like an hour or two, where we're like, this doesn't feel good. That I wanted this decision to happen, and the other one took precedent, and it just pulled the story in another direction.
Yeah.
Like, you like to have full control over a story like that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That just seems like it's misunderstanding what people are wanting from that experience. I don't know. I can't think of anybody who's like, I want to play this really story-intensive thing, but also not control it in any way. So it's like...
Yeah. I think it might be cool if you're specifically role-playing, like, we're like a couple of rivals or something, and for some reason we have to go through this together, and we're like sort of butting heads the whole time or something like that. Yeah. But otherwise, like in the raids, it would just be 4 people with totally different...
Right.
Goals, just like dice rolling to do things.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay with the game?
With the Old Republic?
Yeah.
A few months. I would go back and try it occasionally. I know I tried it once or twice after it went free to play, but I never stuck with it for more than a few weeks.
Yeah. I remember wanting to get to the higher levels and to see the story, even for multiple classes, but I couldn't stick with it.
Yeah.
And the expansions even look good.
Yep.
It seems like a wasted effort on their part almost.
Yeah, well, and I think they've almost admitted that they know they fucked it up by doing the, 12 times experience. Because that tells you that they know why you're there. And, it makes me feel like I'm wasting my time if I ever play it outside of those sort of events.
Right. I feel like they should just activate that permanently at a certain point.
Well, I think if you pay them, they'll give you more experience for doing that stuff, so you can skip some of that stuff, which is wild.
Yeah, well, did you think that some of the non-character missions and stuff were good? Like, are you missing anything by skipping them?
I didn't think so.
No?
It was mostly just time-wasting busy work, I felt like. It was just the stereotypical, go kill 5 rats. I'm not going to give you a reason why, just go do it, that kind of thing.
Right. So... Did you compare it to Galaxies at all, or you were just disappointed in a general sense?
At first, I definitely was comparing. I don't know that I was aware of it, but I definitely went in expecting the worlds to be much more malleable and to be able to have some sort of agency that affects the world. And you don't. Luckily, I had played KOTOR before, so I had that style of storytelling down. But a part of me had always hoped that it would have just a little bit of the Galaxies flair in it, and it just didn't. And it weirdly paralleled Galaxies in that both of them launched without space combat, and both of them had it added later, which I thought was kind of strange. But even that was weird. I don't think either of them did well, but yeah.
So you didn't have any friends between the 2 games?
No, I don't think so.
So that's BioWare, right? The Old Republic?
Yes.
Are you a fan of that developer?
I used to be.
Around that time, you mean?
Yeah, I KOTOR is probably one of my favorite games ever. Mass Effect 2 is incredible. I probably would have played The Old Republic had it not been a Star Wars property, and I almost think it would have been better in that case, because I would not have had baggage of things like Galaxies behind it, but...
Right. I bring up BioWare because I picked up Andromeda for $5.
Okay.
And I'm not a huge Mass Effect fan. I played the first game. I didn't dislike it. I just didn't put time into it at the time.
Okay.
I think Andromeda's pretty good. I don't understand the hate for it.
It's been a while, so I don't know that I can articulate my opinions about it very well, but I will say there was a point in that game where I will say I didn't really find any of the party members to be likable, or I never really felt connected to them the way that you have Rex and Grunt and the Justicar and stuff, and Morden Solus. Like, I can't even name any of the people in Andromeda.
So you mean like as a direct comparison, it was not as good of party members and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and I remember there was one point where you, like, there was some sort of, like, jungle planet, and I got there, and the story started, and I was like, I feel like I just accidentally skipped, like, 10 hours of exposition. I have no idea who anyone is. I don't know what anyone's motivations are here. None of this makes any sense. It felt like it almost felt like a parody of the original Mass Effect games to me, where they were like, here's going to be an original new race, but it's basically just everything that you've seen before, and it's just going to be filled with a lot of science fiction cliches. And especially with the way they had talked about Andromeda, with like, we're going to go to this new galaxy, and it's going to be everything new, and you have two races that are new, and like, they're both just like extensions of things that you have seen before. I will say, I thought the gameplay felt really good in Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed.
But it wasn't enough for me.
Was it like a gradual realization, like you were excited and then you realized like, I'm not liking this as much?
I was really excited for it when it came out. Like, even with all the negative press, like the bad animations and stuff like that were like so memeable never bothered me. I was like, if this has solid storytelling and solid characters, I don't care what it looks like. But like, I just never connected with any of the characters, and I found the story to be just contrived and annoying.
Yeah, I'm only like maybe 5 hours in, and so far I think the concept is pretty cool. I mean, the first thing makes you do is design your character and your twin. And you can pick to be either the male or the female, and then the twin would be the opposite.
Right.
And by designing your characters, it designs your father
Yep.
and puts him, like, it does that automatically based on what you decide, and then it puts him into the story. And all of that, to me, I was like, oh shit, this is cool. And granted, this was like 4 years after the game came out or something. I'm coming to it really late.
Yeah.
And the concepts of going to just a different galaxy and finding these optimal planets for new civilizations and stuff, and having to terraform the planets and stuff.
Yeah.
It seems pretty cool to me, and you got the jetpack, you're bouncing around and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe it's because I can't compare it directly to the party members from Mass Effect. Maybe they just seem like hollow versions and bad comparisons to the other game. Maybe you need to be a Mass Effect fan to really understand.
And I will say some of my further storytelling problems come way down the line, and I like get into like heavy spoiler territory, so I don't want to push that. I will say it feels like that game was a lot of setup and no payoff, and then they canceled all the DLC for it and canceled whatever sequels they had. So not only was there no payoff in the game, there will never be payoff.
Wow.
So yeah.
So there was more planned for it, but it was just received really poorly.
Yep. And they just canceled all of it.
Wow.
So they even shut down the studio that was working on it. So.
So do you think your opinions pretty much line up with the public's opinions about the game?
I sort of, other than like the like I said, the animation stuff never really bothered me. I never really had any game breaking bugs that I can remember with it, and those were like the two big things I heard. I know a lot of people got out of it because of those. For me, it was more of I just found the storytelling to be way subpar for what I expected from BioWare.
Was it because it was some sort of B team that was making the game, because it was not a mainline entry?
I think it could have been, and it makes me really sad because the story I always heard was that the Montreal BioWare studio was people who grew up, like, their formative years were in playing the Mass Effect games. Just people who loved and like lived and breathed the series, and because of the horrible troubled development it had, it just fell apart, and they never got to really execute on that vision. And it makes me really, really sad, because I think they probably could have done something special if they were given the time that they needed to. But because they didn't have much time, and they were all new or like relatively inexperienced, as I understood it, it just never clicked.
Yeah, that's a bummer, especially between how Mass Effect 3 was received, I mean the ending specifically, and then following that up with Andromeda.
Yep.
I don't even think there's anything on the horizon for that series right now.
Casey Hudson, the like general manager at BioWare, has sort of teased that they might be doing something, but it sounds like it's in like pre-production right now, so I think it'll be a long time And honestly, with the trouble BioWare's had with Anthem, I don't know that we'll ever see. I worry that BioWare might not exist.
That's crazy to me because they're one of my favorite developers. I love Dragon Age. I love KOTOR, like we were talking about before.
Yeah.
That's sad.
It is. But I think it's indicative of the industry. Yeah.
It's scary for single player things in general. You have to be such a success to do anything.
Yeah.
So I had another, getting back to MMOs, and I don't know if you want to talk about WoW, but I've seen recently that they're launching classic servers, like official classic servers. And how do you feel? Like, do you have any interest?
Never. I have no interest.
Wow.
Vanilla WoW was bad. That is why we do not exist in it. And I think that is exemplified in the fact that the developers at Blizzard have had to put out a list of things that they're like, these are not bugs. Like, stop reporting these things as bugs. This is how this game was. You just don't remember that these things were broken. And, like, they're specifically trying to replicate what that game was then. Like, they're not going to be fixing all of those problems because people were begging for that version. So they're going to give it to you, warts and all. It's a lot of fucking warts.
What are some of these issues?
I would have to bring up a list. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I think it's stuff like... actually, you want me to look something up?
Yeah. I can just fast forward with the magic of editing.
It's things like warrior health regeneration used to be much different than it is now. Quest objectives and points of interest are not tracked on the map or the mini-map.
I remember that.
So it's like a lot of quality of life stuff they put in the game isn't there because that's not what people wanted. I think what people really want is all of the quality of life stuff built on top of some weird warped nostalgia version of WoW that will never be able to be replicated.
Yeah, it's a bunch of rose-colored glasses stuff.
Yeah.
I remember I was just like a level 6 shaman, and I was trying to get my first totems or something as a orc.
Yeah.
And I was stumbling around these like mountains looking for this quest marker, and I had no idea. I was on thoughtbot.com or whatever the hell, and it ended up taking like hours to do a single low-level quest.
Yep.
And I think people fool themselves about what they actually want.
Yeah.
And it's hard, like in Final Fantasy 11, like I've had to come to terms that some of the changes they made are a good thing. Like you could put a level cap onto yourself in order to play with some of your lower level friends. Like if your friends are 20 levels below you, you can cap yourself so you can gain experience with them. And that was something like people were like, oh, it's casual now, blah blah blah. But like that solves a major issue, not having people to play with. And it's just quality of life changes like that. You strip that away, you're just like punishing yourself.
Yeah.
At that point.
And I think some of it, at least with WoW, is like this weird bitterness people had with like they changed mounts, the levels you got them from like 40 to 20 or something. Yeah. People were like, well, I had to work to 40, so you need to work to that. And then they have built up this mythology in their head that they were better at the game because they had to do that, without thinking about the fact that it's probably just like a quality of life thing that now you don't have to run everywhere. And now they're going to have to do that because that's the hill they decided to die on.
It sounds like some baby boomer shit. About millennials.
It does. It does. It's like their own identity is tied to they were better back then, so the game must have also been better back then, and it's just garbage.
Yeah. Do you think that there were some, maybe a few things that were better or only possible? Like, I see the example that a mage or a warlock would have to teleport the party to a dungeon, and some of the experience was just traveling somewhere and getting everyone together instead of just clicking a button and warping there. And it was part of the experience to sort of ride out with your group. And maybe you die along the way, or maybe you run into enemies like other players on the way and you have a skirmish. Like, do you lose some of that with the quality of life?
I don't think you do. I think a lot of it's just like they ended up building Bejeweled into WoW because people would be flying places and get bored and want something to do. So I think at that point Blizzard was showing like, hey, people don't actually like this stuff. I think there's a vocal minority that maybe think they really did, but I'm not sure that they did because people were literally doing anything else.
Literally Bejeweled
Yes.
is in the game?
Yep. It was like a mod they did with PopCap that like put it into the game, so when you were on like a flight path or something, you could just play Bejeweled.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think there was a Plants vs. Zombies thing too, but I think that was like actually there was like a garden somewhere in the world, so I think that was something different. But
Well, I think it's funny that the vocal minority has the game officially now, if they want it, and I wonder, I'd be interested in seeing the numbers of who's actually playing it.
I've seen a lot of complaining. I mean, I don't know how many people are, but I've seen it seems like no one's happy, which is what I thought was going to happen anyway. Like, I'm not in any way surprised.
I'm surprised to hear that you didn't have any sort of interest or nostalgia for the early version.
I loved my time in vanilla in BC. I would never want to do it again.
But WoW as a whole, you have fond memories of?
Yeah, I do. And a lot of it's sort of similar to Galaxies, like the not knowing what I'm doing, just wandering around the world and exploring. And I think now that maybe is the one thing that I think could be replicated. Well, I think that is an experience that I would like to have replicated. I don't think it's possible. Because like Thoughtbot and stuff like that were like bad websites that were ugly and it was hard to find stuff on them. But now with things like Wowhead and all that stuff, like I don't like, maybe you could turn some UI stuff off so it was harder to find quest objectives, but at that point I don't know that it's really adding more exploration. It's just adding fodder. I don't think you can really experience what that game was with the way the internet is now.
Right. Yeah. So some people complain that with the modern UI, like you're just following arrows and stuff like that, and you're just like basically going from checkpoint to checkpoint and crossing things off the list. But technically, you're just like pulling up the solutions online and just doing that anyway.
Right.
So maybe we are just all fooling ourselves.
That is the impression that I have gotten, is that I think it's totally a rose-colored glasses thing. I think that they have just streamlined it in a smart way, and people lost other things along the way with WoW and the like culture shifts of it, and they tie it to that time in the game when it's so much in internet and gaming culture has changed.
Right.
Outside of it.
I think that's a human nature thing. It's been
Definitely.
the way things used to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you wouldn't want Galaxies Classic or anything like that?
I don't think so. I would love to reconnect with the people I knew, and I'm sure if like the EMU stuff exists, and there's even people. The servers don't fully work well, but there's some that are a little more fleshed out than others that are like even adding their own new content and stuff like that. It sounds cool, but like what I would want, what I would want today is not what it was then. It would be what it was then with a lot of quality of life stuff added to it. And it's not going to really exist anywhere, and it wouldn't be the same experience, and I'm not the same person I was. Like, I really don't think I could ever have that magic recreated at this point.
Yeah. I think at best you could like travel back in time for a day and experience it fresh again.
Yeah.
But I think that's about it. Because my glory days in MMOs, I had real life friends that I was playing with.
Yep.
And I don't even speak to them anymore.
Yep.
So
Yep.
It's just beyond.
Yeah.
That's kind of sad sometimes.
It is. Yeah.
I kind of want to talk about like meeting people in games.
Okay.
Did you meet Matthew in like Halo 2? Do I remember that?
We met on a forum about Halo 2.
Can you, as if I don't know Matthew, can you tell that story?
Let's see what I remember of it. I remember I had I think I was looking for Halo music on iTunes, and I came across a podcast called Podtacular. It's the first podcast I ever heard of. Got involved with them because I just loved Halo so much. Got into their forums. I'm sure it's somewhere in like archive.org or a Wayback Machine or something, but I, at one point, was coming to terms with my own sexuality and posted a really embarrassing thread on these forums. I think it was even titled "Help Me Please" with "please" titled or spelled PLZ if I remember correctly, which is horrifying. And I explained my situation. I was like, I feel like I should talk to my family about this, but I don't know how to. And people had responded at that point, and that was the first time I had ever like publicly been like queer, and I think Matthew had commented in that, or if he didn't, he had seen it. And as cringe-worthy as that thread was, there were a few people who were adults or people who had kids in that forum who like gave me honest advice that I found really helpful. And I think he had seen...
Do you remember what they said?
I remember two of them specifically. One was named JVB and the other one was Captain Kirk, I think.
Wow, you remember their names?
Oh, yeah. They had both said, like, this is, like, I am not gay, like, this isn't the experience that I understand, but, like, at the end of the day, the most important thing to me is supporting and loving my kids. So, like, even if it isn't something that comes naturally in terms of understanding to me, like, I'm going to work to be the best parent I can to support them. And I remember that being really important to me. And I think I was one of the first openly queer people on that website. And I think Matthew saw that post, and that's how he found out who I was. I don't remember the specifics. We had kind of talked a little bit back and forth, and I think he had asked me for advice about coming out to his mom. And I remember we were...
Can you tell me how old you guys were at this time?
He was 16 and I was 17.
Okay.
At least when we were talking to each other. I think it had maybe been a year or two before that I had posted the coming out thread. So I think that was the time period, which makes me even more embarrassed that I had that Help Me Please. Anyway,
Help Me PLZ.
yeah, it's just awful. So he'd asked me for help, and we started. I remember the first time we talked like over voice. We were in Halo 3 on the map, The Pit.
Okay.
I don't know why I remember, and I had a needler at the time, so like it obviously left some sort of mark that I can remember that stuff. And I really hated The Pit, so I don't know why we were playing on it. And then we started talking, and then a lot of our relationship ended up from there being we would talk on AIM or on then it progressed to voice chat through Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. And I also think, I don't remember if it was voice chat through Mario Kart DS or if we were like talking on Skype and playing it together.
I didn't even know you could voice chat on DS.
Yeah, it was like in very specific modes in specific games you could.
Is this like pre-cell phones?
It would have been right around the time I got my first cell phone, which was pre-iPhone, I think, or right when the iPhone was coming out. So, I had just started texting around that time. It was like a flip, or like one of the keyboards that like pulled out on the phone, like the physical ones.
So were you romantic at this time, or were you just confidants and friends?
We started as confidants and friends. It didn't take long, and like, it's horrifying to look back at like how stupid we were. But I remember after a few weeks, he said he wanted to ask me something, and I thought I knew what he was going to say. So I said something to the effect of like, "Oh, I know what you're going to say," and the answer is absolutely no. I don't even remember what I thought he was going to ask. What he was going to ask was if I wanted to try to be like his boyfriend or whatever. And it was on or the day before Valentine's Day.
So you shut him down.
Yeah, without knowing. So that was awful. But then eventually I think he like shut down after that, and I realized I must not have known what he was asking, and then all that stuff. And yeah, so that's kind of... Yeah, so it started like with Halo 2 and then like went through Pokemon and all that stuff.
Did you actually play Halo 2 together, or it was a forum?
I think by the time we were talking, Halo 3 was a thing.
Uh-huh.
So I think we played Halo 3 together. I remember him being very good with sniper rifles, which I'm very bad with. Yeah, so we probably played a bunch of Halo 3 together.
So how long have you been together now?
11 years.
Wow.
I think it'll be 12 next year.
That gives matchmaking a whole different meaning.
I don't appreciate it. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Get out of my house now.
So I want to rewind a little bit, if you don't mind. That advice you got on the forums, did you put that to use? How did that go?
I think so, because I did end up coming out to my mom at that point. I'm trying to think. I don't think that was... My memories of that time are sort of weird, because it was right around the same time my grandmother died, so like stuff gets mangled. But I do remember telling her about Matthew, and I remember being very worried that she would not be okay with this. Like, I wrote this whole letter and I gave it to her, like, I can't talk to you about this, like, I have these gifts to you, and walked away. And she came back to me with it and was like, this is it? Like, this is all that you're freaking out about? So that was kind of funny.
So you had worked yourself up and
oh yeah,
and she wasn't bothered by it?
Nope. I don't know that I would have been able to do that without the support that I had gotten earlier on. In my head, it feels like those were years apart, but they must have been within months of each other. Yeah. That's
a big deal that you could get that out of games or something tangential to games.
Definitely. I don't know that the adults there, they were mostly like moderators. Like, I don't think they were like in talking with people mostly. I don't think, and I've actually thought about reaching out to them now and being like, hey, I don't know that you would even remember me, but like, I have found them both on Twitter. And be like, just, like, you had a really positive impact on my life in this video game forum that you were a moderator on, like, years and years ago with, like, this one comment you made. Because I think I was in a very vulnerable state, and there were people in positions of power, even if a moderator on a forum is not a huge amount of power. Like, they were someone who I inherently thought had more understanding of the world, so their viewpoints did matter.
Did they respond to you?
I haven't reached out to them yet. I did find them on Twitter, but
You plan on doing it.
I feel like it's weird. Like, I don't want to be like, hey, remember that weird kid you talked to 10 years ago? Like, I don't know. I haven't decided if it's weird to reach out to them or not.
I think they might appreciate to know that they've helped someone out.
Yeah. I'll one of them I know I follow on Twitter. I don't think I follow the other one, but I'll have to figure it out.
Well, I would suggest you do that.
Okay. I probably should, yeah. It is, because I bet you they probably don't even think about it, but yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten anything else out of video games, like any sort of solace, or what is a good word for it?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think some games have been good at starting conversations. Like, I have a very bad memory, so my only thing I can come up with right now is Celeste from a few years ago, and the way that it was very openly about, like, depression and anxiety and things like that. And I heard a lot more people talking openly about those subjects because of that, and I'm sure that's not unique to that game, but I think a lot of good can come from that, and I can imagine being like a middle schooler, like an early high schooler, dealing with that stuff and playing a game that is mirroring back to me the things that I'm going through. I think that can be really powerful, especially because it's a form of media where you have agency versus like reading something in a book. It's something that you are actively participating in. I think that can be really powerful.
Mm-hmm. And also, you mentioned at lunch earlier, Mario Odyssey was helpful to you when you were going through. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah. So the last 3.5 years, my mom was going through treatment for terminal brain cancer, and that was hard for me. I'm an only child, so, and like growing up, my dad worked a lot, so I was always with my mom. I was very close to her, and when the cancer progressed, she mentally declined, and she was not quite the person that I had always known growing up. She wasn't the support system I had, and dealing with that was hard. And having something like Mario Odyssey that is like so pure and joyful really helped lift me out of that. It like gave me something positive, and it feels like so much media now is so cynical and dark and edgy, and there's just so much joy in Mario Odyssey that I don't know at a different point in my life that it would have connected with me in the same way, but it gave me a form of escapism to be like, I'm just going to experience this bright, colorful, fun world and like not have to worry about the super dark realities of all of it. And I think because, like I had said, because it's something that you have agency in, it's like I'm actively invested in this. So it's even more than just watching like Parks and Recreation or something like that. That's positive, but you're not connecting with the same way.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really big.
Yeah.
I remember you mentioned, because this podcast has been on hold for a while, and I talked to you months and months ago about wanting to do it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a game, That Dragon Cancer or something like that.
Yes.
Do you have a couple games like that you could talk about?
Trying to think. So I know that Dragon Cancer. I can probably talk a little bit about that and what I remember about it, which isn't a ton.
That's whatever you remember.
So I just remember that it was the first game that I had seen that really was dealing with loss in a way that I had never seen in media before. So like in one of the early scenes in the game, and I should say it is a game that is exploring two parents' their emotions after they lost a baby to cancer. So
can I ask if your mom was alive at this time that you played the game?
She was.
She was.
Yeah, but she was fairly new to the, like, she had been diagnosed recently, so she had not declined much at that point. I think that Dragon Cancer probably would have destroyed me if I played it later on through that. But that game did things like it made you sit in a room with this newborn child as it cried, and like that really saved me, because you can't get away from it in the way that like that is what they must have been experiencing, of like the joy of having a new child, but it's not easy and it's taking a huge toll on them, and then in addition to that they find out all of this tragic stuff, and it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's like not realistic. It's like almost impressionistic, the game.
Like stylized.
Yeah. And it like it seems more that the like visuals and audio is designed to give you small snapshots into their personal their emotional roller coaster through having a child with cancer than it is telling like a necessarily coherent, straightforward story. So it's a lot of like scenes playing out like as the world's like literally ripping apart around you and that kind of stuff.
So it's like impressionistic in that way? Like, is there not a lot of dialogue and stuff like that?
There is some dialogue, but it's not like traditional dialogue trees. It might be like I think I remember like taking like a boat through an area that's like, it's not like a real thing. It's like symbolism all around you. Like instead of there being like islands or something, there's like lots of fake structures, and as you're going through it, you hear like bits of dialogue around you, but it's not like a conversation. It's just you getting like diagnosis of the child or that kind of stuff.
I think that was based on the experience the developer had.
Yes, the team that did it had lost their children, or a child.
Do you remember how the game concludes?
I remember being sort of turned off at the end because they ended up leaning really hard into religion, so it got into like a lot of religious iconography and stuff like that doesn't super mesh with my worldview. Mm-hmm. So that's more of what I remember, that like it was interesting the way it ended, but it did not connect with me the way the like rest of the story necessarily had.
Did that game help you come to terms with some of the emotions you were having?
I don't know that it helped come to terms with anything, but I think it did help in that, like, in playing it, I felt emotions that I had been feeling with the stuff that I was dealing with, and just knowing that, like, other people were dealing with similar things was helpful in some small way.
Definitely. Did you share that with your mom?
She didn't care about games. I don't know. I think I may have mentioned offhand that I had like played a game that had explored like cancer, but I don't know that she would have been interested enough to follow up in any real way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So are there any other stories you want to tell along those lines, or is that pretty much it?
I can't think of anything that it would explore it more than the Mario Odyssey stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's always stuff like Picross or puzzle games that like can pull my attention into them in a way that helps like deal with hard reality stuff, but nothing that sticks out as much as Odyssey.
Right.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to get back to your relationship with Matthew. You met playing games.
Yeah.
Like, what has your relationship been, and what is it now in regards to games and stuff like that?
We have definitely drifted apart, and that I don't think we play similar games anymore. Whereas he's like really into like League of Legends, and like I don't really play PC games at all, especially not MOBAs. I'm much more into like console shooters and stuff like that. Or I even feel weird saying console shooters because I like Halo and I like Overwatch and I like Apex Legends, and like I don't like Call of Duty and I don't like so I don't know. We've definitely drifted apart. I think we occasionally will still play games together. Like we played through Diablo 3 on Xbox One together, and that was kind of nice. But we both experience games very differently, I think. We both experience media very differently in general. Like if I read a book that I really like, I like read it until it is gone. And it is all that I do. I'm very one-track minded. Or like if I watch a television show or like something on Netflix, like I don't want to watch one episode and then come back the next day and watch it. Like I want to watch all of it at once. And I'm like that with games. And he does not work that way. So I think it makes it hard for us to experience things like that. And we don't play a lot of multiplayer games. And I think that's specifically how we meshed with Halo. And yet, like, because we're playing on different systems, like PC versus console, there's not a lot of good cross-play opportunities, so we just don't really do that much anymore.
Right.
We honestly play more board games than we do video games at this point.
That's cool. Is that something you used to do, board games?
We started playing more games in college because we had friends who, like, knew about good board games. But I think it's more of a recent thing.
It's cool you mentioned Diablo 3. Like, I wish I had somebody I lived with to play games like that with.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But it seems lucky that you sort of met each other when you had a similar game, and then you sort of branched off after that.
Yeah.
So it was definitely fortuitous that you had Halo 2 to begin with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Halo 2 was one of my big formative games. Oh my god.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever been more let down than the Master Chief Collection.
Yep.
I thought it would be this huge renaissance. And then,
It could have been. Yeah.
oh my gosh. Alright, let me see if I got anything else on this list. This pen sucks. What I was trying to think of is, as a gay man, do you feel like you have a lot of representation in video games and in media and stuff like that? Like, have you ever latched onto something as far as that goes?
I mean, growing up, I remember, and this is a story I hear all over, especially with white gay men of my economic status, like middle class, upper middle class. And there was a show called Queer as Folk that we all would like watch at 2 a.m. and like sit in a room that had that on cable, but make sure not to record it so nobody knew you were doing it, and you had to like keep out to make sure your family wouldn't like walk in on you doing it. And that was like the way I first experienced like gay men in any mainstream kind of way.
What is that show?
It's called Queer as Folk. I believe, so that's a US version. There was originally a UK version, then they remade it on Showtime in the US. And then it had reruns on Logo, which is I think where everybody found it.
What was the context of what was happening in the show?
It was about a bunch of gay men living in Pittsburgh and just like their lives. And it was typical like American drama. So there's like one guy who's a drug addict, and like one guy who like is a professional, and one that's like just come out of high school, and like it just felt like the typical American soap opera structure. And I don't even know that it was necessarily that good, but it didn't matter to me because it was me seeing somebody like me on screen.
And that was a big deal to you?
Yeah, just in that, like, I lived in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York and, like, didn't have a lot of context for what gay men were. And I even wonder how much of current, like, my generation, what our understanding of queer culture is, like, how much of that was influenced by what we saw on that show. Because I have heard so many gay men with the same experience.
Really?
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of study or something, but I know my generation must have been very influenced by it. And I think for black men of color, there was also a show called Noah's Ark that was around the same time, but I never saw that. But Queer as Folk was definitely like the first time I remember. There was a character on Desperate Housewives I remember that was gay. But that's around that time the only thing I can think of.
So not so much as far as games or in fantasy and sci-fi and is that sort of avenue of your life?
Trying to think. Especially in that time period, not a whole lot comes up. I know it was a big deal to me when Mass Effect had like same-sex relationships in it.
Tying it back to BioWare again.
Yeah, yep. And I remember that feeling powerful that I could do that. But it is funny because the romances I remember exploring in those games were two women. So like I had that power and I found that to be exciting in that game, but I didn't do it. Which is, I guess, something I should probably think about more. It's kind of weird. Trying to think in terms of games. Like there's Dream Daddy that came out a few years ago that people seem to really like. But it's hard because a lot of more queer-themed content tends to lean into visual novels. And a lot of those visual novels are basically hardcore pornography. So, like there's one game I played that I thought was really cool, and the writing was really irrelevant and absurdist, called Coming Out on Top, but, like, it's not a game I can really talk to people about because, like, it is hardcore pornography, in, like, certain instances of it, and, like, it's hard because I feel like the, like, mainstream AAA games they tokenize queer people, it seems like. Like, even if they're not intending to, like, Apex Legends has a character in it who is non-binary. And, like, that, I think, is really cool that they have that element in it, but, like, it doesn't... Like, it impacts the way I view the world that those characters come from, but, like... And I'm sure that non-binary and trans people find that to be powerful, that they see that representation there, but, like, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. And that's, like, the only outside of BioWare representation I can even think of in games, at least recently.
Do Apex Legends characters have backstories and stuff? Like, how do you even know that about a character?
I found out about it because I watched a video where they were, like, interviewing the voice actors, and it was mentioned in that video. And I think there might be some sort of shorts about the story in it, but I haven't seen them.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, it sounds more like just random trivia if it's just the voice actor talking about it, but if there's shorts, that's a little different.
Yeah, but I'm not super sure about that. And, like, I will say it's sort of core to that character, and that, like, the whole thing about the character's called Bloodhound, is that they are in themselves sort of an enigma, and that, like, nobody really knows where they came from, or what they look like under their armor or any of that kind of stuff. So, but like, that doesn't really play out in the game in any real meaningful way.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious because we talked about how games can represent depression or they could represent grief and stuff like that, but it seems like there's so many things that games still don't represent, or maybe just media in general.
Yeah. Gone Home goes into like a lesbian coming out story, in like the '90s. That I find that to be interesting. That game didn't super speak to me though, and I think it's weird because that game gets dragged into so many conversations that go beyond the scope of it. I think of it as being attacked as like a walking simulator or things like that, which I think I mean, I don't feel like I need to justify the validity of those games, but I think there have been important things that have come from walking simulators, and I feel like some of that does come to the fact that it came out around the Gamergate era, and like any progressive politics in games in any way, causing massive backlash. So I feel like Gone Home is tied sort of into the queer narrative, but yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's not a whole lot else.
I think it speaks for itself that we can't really think of anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like it's like you'll get a few non-binary characters in a game, or like a character who's gay in a game, but it never matters. Not that it necessarily needs to matter. I mean, I guess it can, like, whether Shepard is heterosexual or not in Mass Effect is interesting for the player, but I don't know what it says about the world necessarily. Yeah.
So I don't, unless you have anything else you wanted to say or you missed or anything like that, I don't know how much more I have.
I can't think of anything. I think that's pretty much the gist of it.
Cool.